going to be session 4. Is that right?
Yeah.
Session 4. And an infinite number of sessions, because really, although we're trying to reduce all this to 10 sessions, you have to understand that we're not going to be able to cover every aspect, because the subject matter is so provocative that it always causes us to veer off onto tangents that are relevant to the overall topic of anger. But we will try to follow our outline as closely as possible, but bear with me. Now, I want to start right away with category number 3 of anger, because I've been trying for, I guess, 2 weeks to get to that, but I've been having to pause so that I can prepare you with some background information to help you really work effectively in this particular, on this particular object of anger. So we're going to start with the third object of anger, which is the anger that we have at ourselves. Now, bear in mind that the key for effectively managing anger starts first with the development of more self-awareness. That's why we call them the objects of anger. When you find yourself entering into a state of anger, the first thing that you have to do is to focus on the anger. Focus on the feeling. Become aware that you are angry. Sometimes what happens is that you get angry and it happens so fast and you don't even realize what the hell happened for 2 days. All right? So you have to be conscious. You have to reach for more awareness. And then when you find yourself moving into that state, in fact, of anger, then you have to be able to ask yourself some focusing questions. And the first question you need to ask yourself is, who are you angry at? You see, and that tells you what object. Remember, we talked about the first object of our anger very often is our anger at others, others anger at us, etc. You need to know where the anger is at. You see, you need to locate yourself. Where, okay, orientate yourself. And so very often when you do that and you're able to feel your anger, then to ask yourself who you're angry at and what has happened. Who you're angry at and what has happened to cause you to be angry. You need to be able to start finding answers to those questions if you are going to have any chance at managing this thing. And as we said before on many other occasions, that very often you'll find when you start peeling down this process, you'll find that you're angry at yourself as well as others. You get angry at someone, right? So that's the first object of your anger. You're angry at Johnny because Johnny did this. Then as you squeeze that question and find out who else are you angry at, very often you find you're angry at yourself. And therefore you have to effectively manage both categories of anger in that instance, don't you? You got to manage your anger at the other person, and you got to manage your anger that you have at yourself. If you fail on either case, you will simply get no real authentic relief from that whole situation. So today I want to pick up right away on managing anger at ourselves, because that's a big one. When you fail to manage the anger that you have at yourself appropriately, by appropriate I mean in a psychologically and emotionally healthy way, in a way that is not violent. Okay? When you fail to manage your anger that you have at yourself appropriately, then you will mismanage it inappropriately every time. So let's look and see what are some of the inappropriate management of your anger that you have at yourself. And remember, that was hard to feel. That was hard to feel. It's easy to locate who you're angry at because your attention flows in that direction in the first place. We are orientated outside of ourselves. And so we never reverse the flow of that attention to discover that we also are angry at ourselves. As a result of that, we very often carry around years and years and years of anger that we have at ourselves that is either repressed or worse, repressed, right? And remember, we understand when the anger goes beneath suppression and it enters into a state of repression, and you lose all conscious awareness of it. But you're left with the undercurrent of that same feeling. All right, so what are some of the inappropriate ways of managing anger at ourselves? Well, I guess the first thing you have to do is come out of denial, because most of us cannot believe that we're angry at ourselves. I mean, it's mind-boggling for most of us. Yes, we're angry at other people, right? If I ask you to make a list of all the people you're angry at, you'll put down your husband, your wife, your brother, your sister. I mean, you'll have a long list, but nowhere on that list would you put you. Probably you will have more anger at yourself than at anybody else in a lifetime. So it's very important that we learn how to handle that, because if we mismanage it, we're going to destroy the basis of authentic self-respect. You won't have no self-respect. In fact, that's one of the penalties that you will suffer when you fail to manage your anger at yourself. You will destroy your capacity to have good feelings towards yourself, and you will go into what we call a state of self-contempt. How do we normally manage our anger at ourselves? What are some of the wrong ways that we can observe individuals managing their anger at themselves?
Depression.
Well, certainly, when you get angry at yourself and you don't know how to manage it, you get depressed. Most depression is the direct result of a person's failure to manage their anger at themselves. You have to begin to understand the psychodynamics that leads to this experience of depression and melancholy and sadness, etc., etc. The anger at oneself obviously begins first with the image that we have created of ourselves, right? The image that we usually have a mistaken image of ourselves. We all know that the image that most of us have of ourselves is a composite of other people's opinions. And then out of that mistaken image of ourselves, we begin to move through life, and invariably we attempt situations for which we are hopelessly and inadequately prepared to succeed in. And when we fail, we get angry at ourselves. You're angry at yourself because you picked this man. Everybody told you this man was no good for you. Now they made that clear. Mama told you, brother told you, best friend told you that he's no good for you. But you went ahead and you followed your own judgment, because at the time you thought your judgment was perfect. You thought you had perfect judgment, because you were traveling out of this false image of yourself, this ego. And you thought, well, I got perfect judgment. Forget what mama them said. They don't know what they're talking about. I know better, etc., etc. And you get involved in the man. And 2 babies later, you know, the man leaves you, and now you are angry as hell. At who? First of all, you can locate the first object of your anger, right? Who would that be?
The man.
The man. So your first object of anger will be that man. No good, so-and-so, 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 low down, so-and-so. You understand? And you feel that you can get some relief from that agony and misery if you can now either get revenge on the man, right? Or make him pay, make the dirty bastard pay, right? For his crimes against you, etc., etc., etc. Well, the man may just move to another state, right? And so now you can't get no relief. And so you tend to carry that around with you. That's some more baggage, right? Or if he's here, you can't edit him. You discover there's nothing I can do to edit the man. I can't make this man do nothing. And because you can't make him do anything, you can't get any relief. So that's a whole problem in itself, right? And we've talked a lot already about how we have to learn how to manage our anger at the other person, even the absent of them. We'll talk about that too. But the other person that you're angry at in the situation, in the whole scenario, beside the man, is very often yourself. You're angry at yourself. What are some of the manifestations of anger at yourself? When you start feeling very embarrassed. Isn't it? Have you noticed that? When you're feeling very embarrassed about something, right? You have behaved in a way that is inconsistent with your image of yourself, right? And it has caused you some kind of pain, and then you get angry at yourself. What a fool I was. You know, everybody told me that this guy wasn't gonna go. God, why didn't I see it? And it just done messed my life up. I got these kids, blah, blah, blah. And you're angry at yourself. You're angry at yourself. Another classic illustration of anger that we have at ourselves always comes whenever we are indulging in good intention. Do anybody remember what I mean by good intentions?
When you disguise, I can't
Take
remember.
your time. That's all right. You got the first part of it. Go on, take your time. Anybody else? Good intentions. That's very important. That was part of your homework.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
your
So,
ambition.
you mean, huh? I can tell who done homework and who hasn't done homework, because I can tell who
In the
knows
form
what
of a good deed.
huh?
In
It's
the form-
disguising, right?
Hidden agenda.
Right, disguising your own agenda, your hidden agenda, your own selfish aims and ambitions in the form of a good deed for somebody else. And very often we say that that is always kind of productive. It always comes back and hits you in the butt, right? Very self-defeating. So very often when we have a good intention for someone, and that good intention is, it must fails, we become angry at ourselves. You meet in college, you're young and you fall in love, right? And I shouldn't use always the example of men, but the reality is that we cause a lot of grief, right? So we might as well own up to it, right? We don't have to wait till October the 16th with Minister Farrakhan to confess our sins against our women. But let's say you meet this young brother in college somewhere, and he's a brilliant young man, but he's poor, and you're in love with him. And so you decide, well, what I'll do is I'll sacrifice my own career. I'm going to drop out of school, get me 5 jobs, right? And I'm going to help put this brilliant man of mine through medical college. And one day he's going to become a doctor, he's going to be making $500,000 a year, we're going to have a big house, and blah, 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 and we're going to live happily ever after. Thousands of women have dreamed that version of profanity, haven't they? Right? Okay, some are still dreaming it. In any case, you do the deed, and you sacrifice, and you work, and you postpone your own education, you know, and you may even get a couple of babies in between the process. But 8, 12 years later, brother man graduates, right? And he gets that MD degree, right? And he said, baby, let's go. But he starts moving in a whole different world. Money is a strange animal, isn't it? It has a very strange effect upon people, don't it? And so brother is making all this money now, and suddenly you don't have no education because you stopped yours. He got all his education, so there's a gap, a cultural gap now between you and him. And you can't move in the same circles that he moved in. You become baggage. Plus, you done worked 5 jobs for 12 years, you all haggard, toe up, you have not done anything to keep up your own feminine appeal and ability to compete. So brother finds finally this 22-year-old young girl.
White woman.
White girl is that.
White girl is that. White girl is that.
White girl is that, right? And he divorces you, leaves you. Get this young white girl and you are so angry at him and at the whole, you got all categories of anger going on now. You're ready to kill somebody now, right? You're definitely angry at this man, right? You're angry at that white woman. You're angry at faith. You're angry at all of this. But the person you're most angry at is yourself. And you start feeling that I did all this good for this man for what? Nothing. You start feeling good for nothing. This feeling, this is a feeling. This is not an intellectual thing. This is a feeling. You feel that stuff in your gut. It runs and permeates throughout your whole being. You feel that. And you actually walk around with this feeling of being good for nothing. That's depression, big time. Big time. And all the Prozac and all the Ritalin in the world cannot take you out of that. It can relieve you temporarily from the symptoms of it. But you have to go down here and cure that stuff. When you're having all of these deep feelings of being good for nothing. I was so stupid. I was a fool. The man misused me. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, that good for nothing feeling is made up of a lot of other subsidiary feelings. All of them now throws you into a permanent state of self-contempt. Okay? Self-contempt is the opposite of self-respect. The exact opposite of self-respect. And you feel that my whole life has been wasted, at least those 12 years. And I've done all this good. You become very bitter. In addition to your depression, don't you very often find traveling right with depression is bitterness. Right? And this bitterness begins to grow. Now you already got depression going. Now you become bitter. And you become cynical. Right? And you start feeling that no one appreciates me. The world can't appreciate a good woman like me. Right? Now you're angry at the world. Right? Right? You got what we call abstract anger. Now you're just angry at the world. At mankind in general because they can't appreciate me. I'm such a beautiful, sweet woman. And I offered myself to the world and look what they did. I'm going to get even with the world. And how I'm going to get even with the world? I'm going to throw my words out and deprive the world of my presence. Suicide, very often, becomes the only option. When this feeling of good for nothing becomes too much and your abilities to manage it becomes too little, the net result is a movement towards suicide.
Say that again.
Whenever the feeling, this feeling of being good for nothing becomes too much and start overwhelming you. Not only did you get the feeling from the man, now these two kids, boys look just like their daddy. Just, you know, they look splitting image. Now they acting like their daddy. You understand? And you done did all this sacrifice for them, and now the kids now get to be teenagers or grown, and they abandon you. Now here's another dose of depression. I did all this sacrifice for them kids for nothing. When these episodes start building up, right, and you are just simply accumulating these kinds of experiences, and you're not able to manage any of it. You're not able to relieve any of it. You're not able to give yourself any emotional first aid. You have bad psychological and emotional hygiene. And you're not able to get any relief from that. You start moving toward the only solution that most people can find. Let me just take myself out of here. It's the same thing that children experience. We all probably went through it. At those times, we attempt to run away from home. You know, mom and them don't treat me right. I know I pack my bags, right, on many occasions because I thought, quite frankly, they can't appreciate me, right? Nobody loves me. You feel it like that very often. Nobody loves me. And I pack my little bag. I'm going out of here because I'm going to punish them. I'm going to deprive them of my company. Some people go too far and they blow their brains out. If you read the dialogues of Phyllis Hyman in Jet magazine, you could clearly see she was in that whole mindset, you know? because she couldn't find that man, couldn't find the right man, couldn't find a man that could appreciate a woman like her. You know what I mean? Always something wrong with them. So bear that in mind as you complain about not having the ability to find a good man. You may wind up blowing your brains out, okay? Don't take it personal. It's not a reflection on your worth and value to you, okay? But in any case, you begin to see that there's a lot of different avenues that this feeling of good for nothing can slip in and cause us to have a lot of anger at ourselves. And when we fail to process that anger at ourselves, the net result is a complete loss of self-respect. Self-respect I have defined as a feeling of being worthwhile in spite of our imperfections, our shortcomings, and our faults, in spite of our failures, in spite of our wrong judgment, in spite of the stupid stuff that we've done in life, in spite of all of that, we are worthwhile and valuable as human beings, period. In that case, it's closed, it's unconditional, it's a priori, it's given. It comes with the package of being a human being. And we have to be firmly rooted in that. I've told you on many occasions that the hardest thing to hang on to in life is your sense of self-respect. Hard to have that. Because everywhere you go, people will attack you. Everywhere you go, people are going to find some fault in you, some complaint to you, some effort to manipulate and edit you. They want to make you feel something wrong with you. As you are, you're not good enough. Now you got to do this, get a degree, get a job, do this, do that, do this, do that. Then you'll be good enough for me. And we have to struggle every day to hang on to our innate sense and feeling of being worthwhile. Even as we move into adulthood and into our adult relationship, now your husband or your wife is always pointing out your shortcomings. Emphatically. And then you start feeling, oh, something wrong with me. And it's hard because this is the man that I love. Surely he would not just be saying these things. Or this is the woman I love. Surely she would not just be saying these things. There must be some weight behind it. Or this is my mother. Surely she would not be telling me that I'm, lazy, shiftless, worthless, etc. We begin to start taking it very personal. It's hard not to take the commentary of people that we are in personal relationships with personally. That's hard, isn't it? And we all know that's hard. But I'm telling you that our survival, spiritually speaking, psychologically speaking, and emotionally speaking, is predicated on us developing the strength to not take these people's remarks personal. And by taking it personal, I mean as a reflection on your worth as a human being. This worth you have is not negotiable. Period. Maharaji used to always say that once you got it, you should not sacrifice your self-respect to no one and nobody in this world. Period. Not your mama, not your husband, not your children, not your boss, nobody. Because when you lose your self-respect, then you have lost the very foundation out of which life can happen. You destroyed the whole context and the foundation of happiness. How are you going to be happy if you don't have any self-respect? Now, how is that going to work? How would you know anything about peace of mind if you don't have no self-respect? How would you make any kind of spiritual growth? How would you be successful anywhere? In fact, without self-respect, how would you even make a contribution to another human being? You have nothing to give them but your misery. This is nonsense. So we have to be very militant when it comes to the maintenance of our self-respect. Now, I'm not saying that every time somebody criticizes you, go knock their head off. I'm not saying that. You understand? But I'm saying that inside yourself, you're going to have to find a place where you will not be moved. Period. It's very important, because if you don't, as long as you leave yourself at the mercy of other people's opinion and critiques on you, and you start taking it personal. Now remember, I'm not saying that they may be wrong. They may be absolutely right. They may be pointing out real flaws in your character. Really. It's okay. You can acknowledge that, strive to make some improvement, but don't confuse your flaws with your value and worth. That is mistake is fatal. All right? So that's one of the most common mistake we all make, is we take this stuff personal. And when you start taking everything personal, you're going to find out that you're going to start building up a lot of anger at yourself. And this anger destroys your capacity to experience peace of mind and happiness. So it's a very, very critical area that we have to be able to manage and master as best we can. What are some of the other ways that we can observe in others as well as in ourselves of mismanaging the anger that we have in ourselves? What are some of the other consequences? What are some of the other things we could expect to see besides the things we already mentioned?
You abuse yourself.
Of course. Of course. Of course. You hurt yourself. You abuse yourself. You punish yourself. We call it the logic of self-contempt. The self-contempt has a certain logic. It has a certain logic. I'm good for nothing. I am worthless. From that, it follows that it don't matter what happened to me. Right? It really don't. You may beat me, man, if you like. It's okay, because it doesn't matter. I am worthless. I might even beat myself. Have you noticed that sometimes you feel like kicking yourself in the butt? We all do, don't we? You see? We all do. We want to hurt ourselves, punish ourselves. Right? Punish ourselves. And some people go to the extreme and actually go beyond just the impulse to punish themselves. They start actually punishing themselves. They start carving in themselves. You go inside the prison system, you find a lot of inmates in there carving. They just sit there carving themselves with knives, producing that pain. You know, it's punishing themselves for being no good. It's like whooping yourself. If you're not doing it to yourself physically, then you'll find yourself putting yourself in relationships for yourself to be abused. Unconsciously, you're punishing yourself. Sometimes you'll stay with that toxic wife beater because you feel that's appropriate punishment for the crime of the misuse of your judgment. You see? Let me just stay here and take this ass whooping because I got that coming. Yes.
What about substance abuse?
Substance abuse, of course. Substance abuse, all of these things are very often direct results of a failure to manage this anger that we have at ourselves appropriately. I failed in something, I missed the mark that my ego had deluded me into thinking that I could achieve, failed miserably in the eyes of the public, now I just give up. Yeah, I'll become an alcoholic. Why? I'll drink, yes, because it don't make no difference. What I do don't make any difference anymore. What happens to me don't make any difference for me. They become hopeless. They start experiencing tremendous waves of deep-seated feelings of hopelessness. So it does not matter. I can shoot drugs, I can become a criminal, it don't matter. And you can't deter me by saying you're going to get killed or you're going to get locked up. That don't mean nothing to me if I'm in this state of self-contempt. Because I'm not important. It don't matter if y'all execute me. It does not matter if you lock me down for 30 years. Nobody's going to miss me. I'm useless. Right? And the tragedy of it is that this kind of person in this state of self-contempt will always try to convince everybody else that they also useless and worthless. That's the thing you gotta watch. They will try to convince you that to get you to agree with them. You see, ain't I useless? Right?
Why is that?
Because they.
Misery loves company.
Well, yeah, that's one way of putting it very simple. But it follows from their logic. You see, it validates their logic. It validates their conclusion about themselves, right? It reassures them that they weren't wrong in coming to this conclusion about their worthlessness. And so they actually, unconsciously of course, but they nevertheless will exhibit styles of behavior that is aimed toward convincing everybody else that, you see, I am useless. You see. It's a very, very deep thing. Remember we talked about the forms of negative behavior? You see, there's only two forms of behavior, positive and negative. You don't have no trouble with the positive behavior in other people. You have problems in relationship when there's negative behavior involved. Please make a note of that, right? So how to manage the negative behavior that is inevitably to creep into our relationships. Because we all bring some negative behavior into adulthood with us, right? And the negative behavior that we're just talking about that we often characterize was goal 4 of negative behavior, withdrawal. Withdrawal. They want to be let off the hook, right? Stop asking me to get a job. Now, how I solve that? I already have the feeling of hopelessness, worthlessness. I ain't even entitled to no job. I don't need a job. For what? I'm not no good. But every time mama sees me, she asks me, when you going to get a job? When you going to get a job? Now I got to figure out how to convince this mother of mine that I'm worthless. Right? So she stopped asking me this. She don't understand. She has, you know, and so I will get some behavior going where my mama now comes to the conclusion and agrees with me that I'm worthless and leave me alone and stop asking me about when I'm going to get a job, when I'm going to get married, etc., etc., etc. Right? So that I can withdraw from life. You withdraw to the useless side of life. People who have deep-seated feelings of self-contempt always retreat to the useless side of life. There's, of course, the positive side of life is where you're making a contribution, right? Folks, you have to understand that life has meaning only within the context of the contribution you're making to the welfare and benefit of another human being or mankind in general. Life that is lived, that is not in the mode of contribution, is useless. Absolutely useless. And this is where the person with self-contempt goes. This is where the person that suffers from exaggerated ego contents, the mythology, where it's deteriorated to a level of arrogance, right? This person really is covering up a feeling of what? Contempt for themselves. They're having feelings of inferiority. And the arrogance is a way to compensate for this feeling of inferiority. And so the arrogant person almost always will exhibit a pattern of life that falls on the useless side. They're strictly into themselves. Nobody else. Me, 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 me. Everything is me, 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 me. Everything is I, the big I. I want this, I want that, I. This living under the complete tyranny of your I, your ego, is a useless life. Even when you say, I love you, that I is a guarantee that the statement is false. I love you. I is the most important part. It's the subject of the sentences. Right? When there is love, there is no more I. I drops out. Real intention is there. Right? And a real intention for another human being, there is no I component to it. You understand? Where there's an I component, there's a good intention. And it's going to fail, and you're going to get messed up somewhere. So, I mean, you have to really sit with this stuff. And you really have to meditate literally on it. There is a kind of knowledge, folks, that is only accessible to those individuals who can concentrate with the same skill of a yogi. It's what African mystics call big knowledge. The one people call it big knowledge. For those of you who have read Iwapele or the Pale Fox and things of these nature, or any of the works by the French Egyptologists that went into Africa to gain insight into the wisdom of the Ifa systems or the Akan people, or you read, I think there's something over here, Bilal, isn't it, on Ogotameli and Diderlin and all of that. But whenever those mystics was asked, you know, what did you give these researchers? They said, we gave them little knowledge, the little stuff. Most of all the wisdom you see contained in all of these works on ancient Egypt, right? The systems of ethics and the pyramids and all of that stuff. That's little bitty knowledge. You know, the real knowledge, you have to concentrate. This is big knowledge we're talking about. So you have to concentrate on, you got to meditate on this. This knowledge is like a mantra. You got to be with this thing. You're not going to get it just taking a few notes. You're going to have to drink this stuff. You're going to have to chew this stuff. It's going to have to be digested throughout your system. And the only way to do that, of course, is through homework. And we've talked about that. But back to the point of what we were saying before about this person who's in that deep, in the deep throes of this self-contempt. And they're having these feelings of worthlessness. There's a kind of logic that goes along with that, right? That informs their behavior. It looks meaningless to you, but when you understand the logic of self-contempt, their behavior makes perfect sense. If I have self-contempt, don't it make sense that I should shoot drugs and be a criminal? And don't try to work and be irresponsible? Don't that make sense? It's consistent with the person's image that they have of themselves. Right? It's very consistent. It makes sense. It's logical. Rational. So we have to begin to understand that. What are some of the other things that we begin to notice happens to people in general, and can happen to us in particular, when we fail to manage our anger that we have at ourselves appropriately?
They become violent with other people.
Yeah, yeah. Spirit, that's called displaced. We start displacing them. Big time. When you're angry at yourself, one of the major form of that, the mismanagement of that anger, is we displace it. Right? We take it out on somebody else, though. Right? We take it out on somebody else. Black people as a group suffer from our collective inability to manage our anger at ourselves. And we displace it upon each other big time. And remember, if I'm black and you black, and I got this unconscious anger at you, right? Subconscious, I'm not even aware of it, but it's there. Forget the rhetoric on my lips. That's meaningless. Look at the behavior. Look at the actions of black people. Don't listen to the politics and the rhetoric. We shall overcome. Nonsense. The behavior and the action of black folks tell you with unfailing clearness that we are angry at each other, we hate each other. We got some deep issues with each other, and it's acted out in our behavior, and we displace. But more importantly, it tells us how much anger we have in ourselves. And we displace them until anybody come around. So you're absolutely right, Dorothy. Displacing them becomes one of the most destructive ways that most of us handle our anger at ourselves. We have to blame other people, which is another form of violence, right? Blame. Now we're going to blame everybody. Not me. You know, not me. Your fault. You did this. You did that. Somebody else did it. You're going to find a blame. You're going to find an excuse for everything. Because, you know, it's too much. You cling too much to that ego mythology. You're trapped in it. You're so trapped in that stuff. You cannot acknowledge an imperfection or shortcoming or fault nowhere in yourself. And if you can't acknowledge that, you can't discover the anger that you have at yourself because of one of the failures that those imperfections, shortcomings, or fault has caused. Right? And so you stay trapped in this ego. And you can't get out of it. You can't get out of it. So when you like this, you got to hang on to your illusion of perfection. Ain't nothing wrong with me. And you will blame everybody that you come across. You'll blame your wife, your children, you'll blame your school, you'll blame your mama, your brother, you'll blame that car went down the street over there too fast and therefore that's why I got fired. I mean, it gets way out, right? It gets way out. But you will blame everybody and every circumstance for your failures. Right? That's not mismanaging your anger at yourself. You're still angry at yourself. That's just rhetoric. That's meaningless. Right? Deep down inside, you're still angry at yourself. And you're giving yourself no relief. So what happened? That stuff started building up. Start building. And then what happened to this person? Eventually, when they will reach a point where they can no longer deceive themselves. They will exhaust their capacity for self-deception. And when that happens, they may go out a window somewhere. Okay? They explode. Right? These people are typical because they explode. The moment you touch this stuff, they get way angrier than they need to get. At the slightest criticism of their ego, they blow way up. You see? They have failed to manage their own anger, their own egotism. That's why egotism has to be managed appropriately. So you're right, Dorothy, displacing of that anger that we have at ourselves is very common. So we can see a lot of things happen to people in general and can happen to us in particular when we don't manage our anger at ourselves appropriately. Right? When a person has failed and failed, keeps failing, what is to infinity? Pretty soon this person is going to stop what? Even trying, right? And the stopping of them even trying is going to look to an outsider like laziness. Very often the person that suffers from laziness, do you know some people suffer from laziness? Right? We all do. And we ourselves, to some extent, suffer from laziness. Now, nothing wrong with that. You understand? I'm not condemning any of these things that occur in a normal sense. I mean, some depression is normal. All of us get depressed sometime, right? But if we have enough self-respect, we come out of that depression. We all get lazy sometimes, but we have enough self-respect, we can come out of that. So I'm not talking about normal experiences of these things at all. But the person that has had a lot of failures stop trying and they ultimately become lazy. And laziness very often is a person just total withdrawal. I'm not even going to try anymore. I'm not even going to look for a job anymore. I've been to 25 jobs and all of them told me no. That's it. I'm done. I'll sleep all day. That happens. So we have to begin to see all of the things that can consequence. Well, how do we manage our anger at ourselves? Of course, we know the first step is to come out of denial, catch, and we have to contemplate, be very aware of our anger episodes so we can peel them down to that component that involves the anger that we have at ourselves. But before we even go too deep in that, where did this whole process of anger at ourselves begin? How many things are we angry at ourselves about? Have you ever thought about it?
I live a whole lot of stuff.
Because it's your image of yourself, like you said, and it's all the things you thought you were or thought you possessed. And you still may be right, but until you get to that bridge where you say, I'm right, but I still make a mistake, then you're drinking all of this in that you purported of yourself. And that's deep, and it takes a lot of healing to get through that. A lot of healing.
That's right. Absolutely. we'll find a lot of this stuff are still issues that we anger at ourselves that occurred in childhood. Some of us are angry at the way we look. I know I was. You understand? We grew up in a culture, right, where they have criticized our hair. If our skin was too dark, or our lips too big, or our nose was too wide, and we didn't have that nice European look, they beat up on us, right? And I was angry at God, you see, for giving me the features that will only be ridiculed. You know, when we were little boys, them long heads, you know these long head little boys, right? With them long heads, right? Right? And everybody tells you long head, you ugly, knotty hair, you know, and that stuff started going in. And we start forming our self-image on that.
Right.
That I'm not handsome. I'm not attractive. I don't look good. You see? Start setting me up for a feeling of inferiority. Right? Now I got to compensate for this somehow. Right? So you might try to dress yourself up. Most men don't opt for that. What we normally do is look in another dimension of our being and try to compensate for our inferiorities about our looks. Most women, they just go to the makeup, right? And they start buying a lot of makeup, buying a lot of clothes, and I mean the sisters be working on themselves, right? Because they got to have this physical attraction because it's the most immediate, you know, representation of who you are, right? But the point I'm making is that very often in our childhood, a lot of this anger starts building up, right? It starts building up. And a lot of it carries right all the way over into adulthood. We don't even know it. So what I'm saying to you fundamentally is that if you do the work that I've suggested that you do, you may start finding that the issues that you are angry about, even in your adult life now, are ultimately reducible to those same issues in your childhood.
But how do you change?
Well, through awareness, through understanding. Remember, my whole method consists of nothing but awareness. Nothing up my sleeve, no smoke, no mirrors. One thing only, awareness. As you become more self-aware, your understanding increases. And when that understanding becomes enough, just like when a tree reaches a certain degree of coming into fruition, the fruit falls by itself. Nothing needs to be done. There is no effort as such, no yoga, right? It is understanding. So you have to become more and more aware. One of the things that we're going to be talking about is our early recollections, because this is very important, because our early recollections plays a big role. So we're going to be talking about early recollections. Maybe we'll get into it after the break. Our early recollections. Another thing we talk about is birth order. Just the order in which you were born into the family plays a big role. So we're going to look at some of those things. We're trying to get a fix on this thing, right? We're trying to get a fix on it because we have to continually manage this third object of anger, our anger at ourselves, because that is the foundation of self-respect. I mean, you lose that, you're not going to have a shot at this thing. You're really not going to have a shot at it. So you got to get this one here. You see, you got to get this one here. So we're going to look at some of those things starting today and maybe into the next meeting as well. Well, let's talk a little bit about ways that we can manage the anger that we have at ourselves. How do one manage one anger at oneself?
You talk about it.
To who?
Well, a lot of times you can talk to your mate.
Mate, I'm husband, I'm angry at myself. That give you some relief?
No, it's in the way you talk. It has a lot to do with how you communicate.
Yes, that's true. That is true. One of the techniques that was discovered in early Christianity was confession. In fact, one of the things that made Christianity spread so rapidly was that Christianity was one of the first Western forms of religion that contained a therapeutic component called confession. And so here you have a person that has betrayed their own image of themselves, who have acted beneath their own standard, of integrity, who have violated their own conscience. And remember, what is your conscience? You have to understand it. This is deep. What is your conscience? We all say we have a conscience, but have you ever thought what is the precise dynamics? What is the anatomy of your conscience? What does it consist of? And I'm telling you that your conscience is nothing but the recorded instructions that you have received throughout your early childhood from your parents, your teachers, etc. All of us have about 25, I'm running out of ink here. We have about 25,000 hours of don't do this, don't do that, sit down, do this, do like, live like this, live like that, of instructions. And most of that consists of instructions from your parents. Ham, don't do this, don't chew your food too fast, fix your hair this way, do this, make your bed this way. All those is instruction. It begins to constitute your whole sense of right, wrong. But you have been programmed with that. How much of your conscience is really original? Have you ever thought about it? Almost none. And you confuse your following your conscience with moral behavior. There is no connection between the two necessarily. Moral behavior is a very different thing. You understand? Morality is the ability to intuit from somewhere deeper inside of yourself what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. The pseudo-morality that is nothing more than acting out the influence of this conditioning. The pseudo-morality that we get when we act out of our conscience, you see, it's all external. All of it energy from the outside. It's external. Right? Very often, that's why sometimes when your parents die, it's a strange thing. Mixed with your grief is a tremendous sense of relief. Strange. Strange. You see? A tremendous sense of relief because they can't see you no more. Right? You get your first taste of that when you leave home, right? You know, you feel so good. It's not morbid, but it's really that. You begin to grow up for the first time. Yes?
I just want to ask a question. That's probably for people who are always listening to their parents.
Yes.
But the hard-headed people, they would have a different approach to that.
Yes, although they would think, but not really. Because their whole approach is just predicated on acting in the opposite to what? To this. So it is still based on that. Even the ones who are in rebellion are still under the domination. You see, it's almost inescapable. Right? So we have all of us this conscience, right? And that consists of the instructions and the guidance that our parents, our early teachers, friends, etc., 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 even at the cultural level, you see, has built programming to us during our early developmental stages. Now, we enter into life and we do something that lies outside of this structure, right? Because you have your own impulses. Now, your conscience says you should not, thou shalt not commit adultery, right? But hey, you see, you don't have no control over your sexuality, right? And it just happened one night, and there you go, boom. And worse, it was somebody's wife or or something. Now, woo, you're feeling full of shame, right? Degrading. You're angry at yourself for even doing. Ooh, I gotta get some relief. Well, I go to the priest. I said, Father, forgive me for I have sinned. Then I confess, right? And after I confess, I get some relief, right? Because somebody has forgiven me. The key to the power of confession is that you are forgiven. But you, guess what? Can't you forgive yourself? Can't you do that? you can forgive yourself. And on what basis can you forgive yourself? You're a human being. You do have imperfections, for sure. You have shortcomings, for sure. You have faults, for sure. You have weaknesses, absolutely. And it has caused you to do something that has hurt yourself. You yourself hurt yourself. And you can forgive yourself for that. And work on improving that weakness or that shortcoming. But in the meantime, you still have value and worth as a human being. Sounds simple, hard to do though. Because you have to understand, you can't, you cannot use this just as another form of self-deception, right? You just can't use this as a way, I forgive myself, let me do it. Like people in confession. First week he did an adultery, then the next week he right back again. Father, please forgive me for I sinned. That same woman I told you about last week. You see, what is this nonsense, you know? Right?
Like in mafia pictures, they always go to the priest when
Always
they
go
kill
to the
somebody,
priest.
and
That's
then
right.
that's a business for them.
That's right. So you have to have a penance given. Now, of course, today in the Catholic churches and in most churches, the penance has been reduced to reciting 10 Hail Marys. Nonsense. You see? Just nonsense. All right? But there has to be a repentance. Right? A repentance. One has to repent. Do you understand how this great teaching that we find buried in these books, the Bible and the Quran, and all of these admonitions that they give you, see the psychological sophistication of these spiritual instructions? They're very powerful. They're very strong when rightly understood. If you forgive yourself and you don't repent, then you're playing games again. You see? Now you're just trying to justify. And that's very often what has happened. They've even taken it to the level now where now they'll say that, well, Jesus has died for all my sins. This is beautiful. That's powerful. That means now that I have to do no repentance. Jesus has died for me. I'm off the hook. I'm not responsible. And now I can just go sin some more. But even they misunderstood that, because even if it was the case, Jesus would tell them, then don't sin no more, if that's going to be your position, that I've died for you. Okay, that'll work. Nothing wrong with that. We can use everything. So go ahead and believe that I've died for you. In reality, I've not died for you because I've not been born for you. You were born for yourself, you will die for yourself. Jesus, Buddha, Mahavira, Muhammad, Saraswati, these mystics, these sages had nothing to do with that. Everybody is born alone and will die alone. Buddha was not there. No Jesus was there. But it's all right. It's a psychological device. It's good. So if you believe that Jesus has died for your sin, good. Now don't sin. You'll get some benefit even from that belief system. But you see how clever we are? Right? Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad or Moses or somebody has been sacrificed their life for my sins, but now I can, for all time. What they're really saying is that these people have paid my karma. These people have paid off my karma. No way. Only you can pay your own karma. Karma is what? Karma is the consequences of your own actions. All actions have consequences. Those consequences are called karma. You have to pay for your karma. No one can pay for your karma for you. Period. Jesus cannot love for you. I never heard nobody say that. Well, Jesus does feel in love for me. I need not love. Jesus done got married for me. I need not marry. Jesus done work. I need not get a job. You understand? They restrict it only into this tiny little area. And then they deceive themselves. You see?
And try to convince you.
Of course. Of course. Because there's a logic of self-deception, isn't it? Right? There's a logic to all of these negative
They
things.
just want to be supported.
Of course, validated, supported. Because it's hard to hang on to this self-deception without outside validation. right? Because their own innate knowing of the truth deep down inside them keep challenging them. So that means I got to read this Bible every day, because if I miss a day, I'm going to lose my faith. Because something in me is full of doubt and skepticism about this whole Christian game I'm playing. I got to go to church every day, because if I miss, this deep-seated realization of the contradiction may emerge into my awareness. And I got to keep that suppressed. So very often their religious practices are simply means of suppressing truth. It's really strange, the truth that is buried deep within them. But in any case, this confession has a therapeutic effect when understood correctly and used correctly. And for many centuries, it was used correctly. So we're not going to say that the Catholic or Christian institution has always been bankrupt. I will not say that. There was a time it provided a vital thing, but only for a little while, and then it died and plunged the whole of Christian Europe into a dark age that they sat in for 1,000 years. And that was one of the things that gave birth to the so-called Renaissance and the so-called Age of Enlightenment in Europe. Their scholars, their scientists took a real close look at this corpse called Christianity that still had a stranglehold on people, and they decided that it is all mythology. And Europe broke out of the bondage of Christianity and gave birth to Marxism, socialism, and they started experimenting with religions from the East. They became very interested in ancient Africa. Your Egyptologists started arising out of that culture. They went on a worldwide search for truth. As they went on a worldwide search for wealth, in the Age of Enlightenment, these men and women in Europe started going outside of Europe and outside of the Catholic Church. Many of them just broke with the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church. The Protestant movement was born, and all of the species of Protestantism and all of that. But all of that was a realization, you see, of the fact that this thing had deteriorated, to a point where it was not really, this had turned into a joke, turned into a joke. So one of the ways then that we can deal with our own anger at ourselves is to forgive ourselves. To forgive ourselves. And to repent. It's strange that we come back to this, right? I've taken all this time to say something that you all have heard before. The only twist on it now, I'm not saying come to a priest or go to a pastor and be forgiven. I'm saying you forgive yourself and you repent. And immediately you will get relief. You know when you did it right, because the first thing you will get is a tremendous sense of relief from carrying around all of that secret, that shadow material. When we angry at ourselves and the actions that have been the cause of our anger, we secret that stuff. Linda was saying you could talk to your mate. Yeah, only about the superficial part. But the real stuff you're angry about, you will never discuss it with your mate. That stuff is kept tight, secret. Right? Surface stuff, yeah, okay, we can talk about that, because that's, avant-garde, right? It's all right. But that real stuff, not only are you not going to talk about it, you're not even going to allow it into awareness. If it slips in, you push it down. Right? Instant. Right? No one talks about them abortions you had in high school. You don't talk about that. You understand? At all. Or you don't talk about your early experimentation with drugs. You don't talk about that. You don't talk about anything that's going to threaten this stuff too much in your image that you're projecting on that. But that's the very stuff you're angry about at yourself. Damn. You know what I mean? I got whatever it is, right? And you fail in your own eyes. and it was degrading and you're ashamed of that, you're not telling nobody that stuff. Nor is it necessary. It ain't none of their business. You understand? It's not them that needs to forgive you. It is you who need to forgive you. Right? And you are the one to. So I'm not telling you go and tell all your intimate secrets. No, quite the reverse. You know, keep that stuff, but forgive yourself for that. Really forgive yourself for that. I don't want you to play with it. I don't want you to do it on a superficial basis. You know what I mean? I want you to go to somewhere in yourself where maximum sincerity resides. You know, get as real with yourself as possible. Don't be dramatic and don't be theatrical and don't be emotional and don't over-romanticize this thing. Be real with it and really forgive yourself. Accept yourself. To forgive yourself is to accept yourself. In spite of all your shortcomings, and in spite of all your failures, and in spite of all your weaknesses, and in spite of all the things that you've done wrong in life, and in spite of all the things that, you know, has gone on in your life that you're ashamed of, accept yourself. And you forgive yourself. And you repent. Repent means you make an effort to correct it. That's it. It's interesting that in ancient African spiritual systems that predates all other spiritual systems on the planet, that there is absolutely no concept of sin. None whatsoever. This whole concept of sin did not even enter into any kind of spiritual system of cultivation until the advent of these Europeans who misunderstood spirituality from Jump Street. They never understood. And by the time we find Judaism and Hebrewism arising out of the soil of Africa, the Europeans and the East Coast and these foreigners had already interjected this concept of sin. Sin is not an original concept in any ancient spiritual system at all. Not even so much even in India, in Asia. The concept is common, not sin. Sin, the word itself, originally simply means ignorance. You sin whenever you act out of ignorance. You sin, okay. What is the solution to acting out of ignorance? It's to replace the ignorance with knowledge and act out of knowledge. That's the solution to your sinning. It has nothing to do with Hail Mary. It has nothing to do with tributes to the priesthood. It has nothing to do with that nonsense. Right? You cannot interrupt the process of sin by going and bowing before some icon or praying up in the sky somewhere. It's a wrong understanding even of the original use of the word sin. It means ignorance. And whenever you are ignorant, therefore you will sin. Maharaji used to always say to us that until you are able to take consciousness to the third level, or the level beyond this wakeful level of consciousness, until you're able to bring your attention up at least minimally to the third region of consciousness, you have no option but to sin. Because everything you do will be wrong. Because you're not even high enough in your level of consciousness to know what is wrong. In ancient Africa, they call such people Sahu people. Sahu people. Meaning that you've only developed the lower part of your being. You have not opened up and gone into at least the level of Ma'at, the fourth level of consciousness. And until you reach the level of Ma'at, you have no choice but to sin. Because fundamentally you're ignorant. Yes, sister?
Some of these well-meaning Christian folks and other people in other religions who on the surface are acting, I mean, very, very good, very kind, honest, law-abiding people, even though on the surface they have all this goodness. A lot of this, you're saying, is out of good intentions or is not real?
It's intuitive. It is enforced from the outside. The moment you shut down the police department, you will see their immorality will come out. When we had the riots back in the 60s, the preacher was out there. And the ushers. You know what I mean? That morality collapsed. But the best place to see the real nature of anybody's true personality, because you can't measure it out here in these relationships at this level. But if you go into a dream, that's why dream interpretation has always been so important, both now in psychotherapy, but in ancient times even more so. In ancient time, the first thing that we would look at would be your dreams, because we could see your real personality. In your dream, your real personality comes out. You have to understand that the I that you have now is the same I you take into your dream. The I does not change fundamentally. But what does change is we get a closer look at your personality. So when you are in a dream, the real personality that you have suppressed comes out. So in your dream now, you're doing all those things, right? That your goodness that you have now in this wakeful state of consciousness does not allow you to do, because it will contradict your public image. It will go against your ego mythology, all these other things. But when you go into a dream or into fantasy, this here ceases to suppress your real personality. So in your fantasy now, you can fantasize that, well, here you're moral, and you're upright, and all these other things. Very, very strict. You know, you're a member of the church, and you don't do all these things. But in that fantasy, they fantasizing about being in Vegas on that beach with a handsome young man, you understand, laying up in a hotel, throwing down. But that's in their fantasy. You can't see inside their fantasies, so they're safe. And they can just get away with this act of goodness, of righteousness. Or you look in their dreams and you can see that. You know, oh, I'm honest and hardworking. But in their dream, you'll see them robbing banks, trying to get money. The personality in the dream is more real, more authentic than the personalities that you're sitting in now. Please make a note of that. All of us sitting in this room right now is in a level of unreality. And if you have defined yourself simply by looking at the personality you have now at this level of consciousness, in this state of consciousness, then you only have a very superficial, very social concept of who you are. You're still a long way from who you are. The real you is not found there. You don't have to go deeper into yourself.
You know, Bhagwan, yesterday I was watching The Other Side. It comes on in the morning on those talk shows. And they were talking about dream analysis, and they were saying that that some people, and I know this to be true because some people have told me this, that they can go into their dreams and can predict outcomes and do all of this. If dreams are, as you say, ways in which we continue the waking state, as we know it, into the dream state, how is it that people can do that? How is it that people
let me explain. You have to understand the hierarchy of consciousness. Something has to be said about that. You have to understand that the given state of consciousness are the waking state, the dream state, and sleep without dream. Okay? These are the three normal states that every human being is given to. So your whole consciousness moves between these two parameters on a daily basis, on a cycle. Right? You will come into this state of consciousness, wakeful, that's where you're at now. Then you'll stay here for a while. Tonight sometime you'll go toward this state, and in the process in between it, you'll have a dream. You see, you may not remember it, but you'll still be in there. And the ego that exists here, the persona, the personality, is the same one at all levels. Okay? Same one. Now, you were talking about another state of consciousness. That's not dream, where you're able to intuit these things. That's at the next level. The mystics call it Turiya, but we in the West refer to it as the level of intuition. Okay? The fourth level of consciousness. But there's more, because this is still in the realm of the mind. Then you go to what, now you get into this astral, causal, and pure spiritual. Okay? Sometime in some we'll go into all of these things. All right? This is where all the sensory systems are contained. The sensory systems of perception. The capacity to see. We possess the capacity to see independent of the eyes. Has nothing to do with your eye. You can see, period. Don't you see in dreams? Of course you do. Do you use these eyes? Of course not. When you're fantasizing, don't you see what's going on in your fantasy? Do you see them with these eyes? No, you don't. It is the pure capacity to see. All of the senses that are located and tied up with an organ in the body exist independent of those organs. All right? The body is just a vehicle through which the thing flows. But the capacity to hear, the capacity to see, to smell, to touch, to feel, these all exist independent of any physical vehicle whatsoever. And they're located at the so-called astral level. Okay? But even here, the capacity to know at the causal level, because it causes everything else. Here, for instance, when sensory perceptions is moved back to this level, you have the direct perception. You can almost see how direct perception, how sensory systems are a corruption of the capacity for direct perception. It gets a little deep. You have to understand it's like, you understand the analogy of white light passing through a prism? If you got colorless light, you pass it through a prism, right? And it splits into the spectrum, right? You get all the colors. But the light itself is colorless, right? Something like that. Here you have direct perception. When it hits the astral region, it splits into the 5 sensory systems. You understand? But the energy itself has a direct capacity to know. No thinking is required. No reason is required. But those are all subsidiary processes. And at the pure spiritual level, you see, knowing is not necessary. I know it's hard for you to imagine a state of being where you don't even need to know because you become. You are. You see. But the Africans, ancestors, called that state, when they attained it, they would always say, Anukasa. The level of Asa. I am. That's it. So that's just a brief overview. But we won't go into all of these other things now. But the thing that we do want to look at as it relates to our subject here, and I'll leave the intuitive level up there just for your sake. But basically what I'm saying that the ego and the personality that you have in this wakeful level of state is usually restricted. There's a restraint on you. See, in this level, you can't do all the stuff you want to do because you got this social public image. Nothing wrong with that. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not condemning anything. But I'm saying that if you take that to be who you really are, then you are still practicing some form of self-deception. If I want to know who you are, I'll go look in your dreams. All right? That'll show it. Because in your dreams, you behave more authentically across the board. Across the board. People that act brave may be cowards. That bravery that they're putting on in this state is just a form of overcompensation for their cowardice. But if they go into a dream and they're in a situation where they need to act courageously, in that dream they will run like hell. You understand? Because they're closer now to the real impulse. They can suppress it up here for the sake of the public. But here, there's no need to suppress at all. It's characterized by the absence of suppression. Or in your fantasies. Fantasies can really, technically, there's not much distinction between these two states. I know this will strike you as odd. You only have very brief moments of wakefulness. The difference between this state and that state is that in this state your eyes are closed, and this state your eyes are open. In this state you're usually immobile, and this state you are walking around. But you are not necessarily at any higher state. Because that's okay, because very seldom, most of your time, if you look and monitor your mental processes, most of your time is spent daydreaming. That's what we get to term, daydreaming.
So when you're dreaming, you're not sleeping?
Yeah, daydreaming is dreaming of the same nature as the nighttime dream, except you're doing it during the day while your eyes are open and you're moving around. You drive in your car and you daydream. You sit in the office and most of the time you daydream.
That's just thinking.
No, daydreaming, not even thinking.
You project.
You see, you're using the thinking apparatus. Yes, you're still sensing and reasoning, but the subject of your thinking is a dream.
Well, why can't you remember your dreams?
You can remember your dreams. You see.
Well, most people can't remember.
Some people, well, I think only because when you're emerging from this state back to this state here, right, then your awareness, you know, is not strong enough to carry that experience with you. But you know your dreams. But when you have a dream, it's right on the table. In fact, you should look at your dream. If you want to do something very interesting tonight, tomorrow morning, immediately after you take your next nap, wake up and keep a pad by your bedside and write down your dream. You see some very interesting.
Most people do not remember.
Don't remember.
Not unless it's having an impact on you.
Yeah,
then you remember that.
Well, here's what happened. But you very often what happens in a dream creates an emotion that you need to use at a wakeful level. Say, for instance, it gets very profound. Say, for instance, you have a problem in so-called life that requires courage, and you can't get it. So very often what the subconscious do will create a situation in your dream that will cause you to act courageously so that it can deposit in your consciousness a feeling of courage to take back to this situation. So very often the dream states is more importantly is trying to lay down the foundation for the emotional energy. There's certain emotions that you need to have to deal with certain things. You understand? You need certain emotions. And if you cannot get them at this level, you'll go down here and get them. Have you ever, for instance, people that suppress sex, go to sleep, they have one of them sexual dreams. They wake up horny as hell. You understand? Because the body needs sex, right? But on the surface, they've been suppressing it. So they have a dream, a sexual dream. They've suppressed that sexual. They may not even remember none of the content, but you always carry over in the morning the feeling, the emotional experience of whatever is happening, the conclusion, the bottom line. You take right into your awareness. Right into your awareness. Dream is one way to get it. There's another way. Then we'll take our break. If I don't look at your dream, because you're right, some people don't even bother to record their dream. They don't have enough consciousness to record their dream. They're not sensitive enough. But if we can't get it there, the other place I can get it, your outline of your true personality is from your early recollections. Your memory. I can get it there. And we'll be doing some of that immediately after break.
Let me ask you one more thing before we break.
All right.
You know, in a way of handling anger at yourself and to get yourself relief, will you give me the differentiation between humility and humiliation?
Yes. Humility is our self-awareness of our own imperfections, our shortcomings, and our faults. That's humility. Humility is acting out of that awareness. Okay? Humiliation is when somebody else pointed out to you, and you don't believe them, or it threatens your ego. They're humiliating you because they're pointing out your shortcomings. It's humiliating. You see? So the difference, Emma, is in direction of discovery. When you are discovering your own imperfections, shortcomings, weaknesses, etc., it will produce a state of humility with no problem. For instance, one of the things is that you may have in your ego contents that I'm a very, 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 very brilliant person. I used to always use the example that a bush can act like a tree, but only around other bushes. The moment it comes in contact with a tree, humility sets in. Similarly, I might think, if I think, well, I know so much, have a lot of knowledge, but when I meet a Buddha, then I realize for the first time how little I know. And that it's automatic, you see, if you ain't got all this ego material, right? That keeps you from acknowledging the reality of it all. So that's humility, is, it is a felt sense of your imperfection. But it does not wipe out your feeling of worth. That's the key thing. Humiliation points out the same imperfection, but it also wipes out your sense of worth usually, because unfortunately you were thinking that you were perfect and somebody found the flaw in you and they humiliated you, right? They pointed out some inadequacy in you, hurt your feelings. Hurt your feeling means what? Made you feel worthless. right? Because you can't have a feeling of worth unless they're wrong. Very often you will begin to now point out to them that you're wrong. That ain't true, because you're trying to rebuild your sense of worth. All right, we'll take a break now. We come back at 2 minutes.